It is 2:47 a.m. Eastern Time on February 28, 2026. On the flight deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford in the eastern Mediterranean, engines are already screaming. F-18 Super Hornets are being loaded. Tomahawk cruise missiles, each carrying in 500 pounds of precision-guided devastation, are being slotted into vertical launch tubes. Intelligence officers stare at glowing screens. Nobody is sleeping. 1,000 miles to the east, in a bunker beneath Tehran, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is meeting with top Revolutionary Guard commanders. He has no idea this will be the last meeting he will ever attend. Less than 24 hours earlier in Geneva, Switzerland, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi sat across a conference table from two of Donald Trump's closest envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. They were already 5 rounds deep into nuclear negotiations. Oman had brokered the back channel. The Omani foreign minister had declared publicly that a peace deal was within reach, and then the bombs fell. What followed did more than change the Middle East. It shattered assumptions about modern air power, stealth technology, and whether Iran's most secret weapon, years in development and never truly tested in combat, could stop the most advanced fighter jet on the planet. It couldn't, but the real story behind Iran's failure isn't only about missiles or radar. It's about a betrayal, a live diplomatic offer on the table, and a third influence in the Geneva negotiations that nobody was openly talking about. An influence that may explain why the bombing began when it did. To understand what happened, you have to go back years before February 2026. For a long time, Iran had been preparing for a single military scenario. If Israel ever sent its F-35I Adir stealth fighters toward Tehran, what would stop them? The answer was Bavar 373. In Farsi, Bavar means belief. Iran's supreme leader personally ordered its development after Russia canceled an S-300 missile contract under Western pressure. Billions of dollars, years of engineering, and immense national pride went into the system. Iranian state media even claimed it was superior to Russia's S-400 and America's Patriot systems. On paper, it looked formidable. The system used phased array radar, capable of tracking hundreds of aerial targets simultaneously. Its Sayad 4B missiles could reach targets hundreds of kilometers away and at extremely high altitude. Iranian engineers said it could intercept fifth-generation stealth aircraft, specifically the F-35. For years, Iran told the world, "Our skies are defended." So Israel came to test that claim. Operation Epic Fury began at 1:15 a.m. Eastern Time on February 28, 2026. 200 Israeli Air Force fighter jets launched simultaneously in the largest single air combat operation in Israel's history. The formation included F-35I Adir stealth fighters, F-15I Ram heavy strike aircraft, and F-16I Sufa attack jets. American forces supported the mission as well. F-22 Raptors were forward deployed to southern Israel. Additional F-35As, F-15E Strike Eagles, and A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft were ready for follow-up strikes. At sea, the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln had moved into the Arabian Sea, while the USS Gerald R. Ford operated in the Mediterranean. Before a single pilot crossed into Iranian airspace, dozens of sea-launched Tomahawk cruise missiles were already flying toward their targets. More than 500 targets were struck in the opening assault. Missile launch facilities, surface-to-air missile batteries, radar stations, command centers across western and central Iran, Revolutionary Guard headquarters, and the building where Khamenei was meeting with his generals. The Bavar 373 system was supposed to detect incoming aircraft, track them, and launch missiles capable of destroying stealth fighters. Instead, something very different happened. The F-35 is not just a stealth aircraft, it is also an electronic warfare platform. Israel had spent years studying Russian radar systems during joint exercises in Greece. Those exercises gave Israeli engineers insight into how systems like the S-300 family worked. They developed electronic countermeasures and specialized weapons designed to blind radar networks. Iran's air defense network had another problem. It wasn't fully integrated. Radar systems, missile batteries, and command software came from a patchwork of Russian, Chinese, and domestic technologies that never communicated perfectly with one another. When hundreds of aircraft approached from multiple directions and at multiple altitudes, Iranian radar systems struggled to maintain tracking. Data delays forced systems to reacquire targets repeatedly. During those gaps, Israeli electronic warfare systems jammed the radar signals entirely. To many Iranian operators, the radar screens filled with noise, and then nothing. Within hours, the Israeli Air Force declared air superiority over Tehran. More than 100 Iranian air defense systems were destroyed or disabled in the opening wave. Advanced S-300 batteries were eliminated. Bavar 373 systems that had taken years to build were struck before they could effectively respond. Iran's symbol of belief had failed its first real test. But the war still held surprises. Days later, Israeli F-35I fighters were conducting deep strike missions over Tehran when one pilot detected something unusual on his sensors: an Iranian Yak-130 aircraft. The Yak-130 is a Russian-built advanced jet trainer used to prepare pilots for modern fighters like the Su-57. Iran had received several of them from Russia in recent years. The aircraft was not flying a combat patrol. Intelligence indicated it had been scrambled to intercept an Israeli Hermes reconnaissance drone over the city. The Iranian pilot never saw the F-35. The Israeli pilot launched an AIM-120 AMRAAM missile. Seconds later, the Yak-130 exploded in the sky above Tehran. It became the first confirmed air-to-air kill in combat by an F-35. The Israeli military released footage showing the interception through the fighter's targeting system. The clip spread rapidly across the internet. Meanwhile, the political context surrounding the war became clearer. In Geneva, negotiations had been approaching a possible agreement. The United States wanted Iran to permanently dismantle uranium enrichment infrastructure in exchange for sanctions relief and international investment in a civilian nuclear program. Iran insisted it had the right to maintain peaceful nuclear technology. The gap between those positions was significant, but not impossible to bridge. Behind the scenes, pressure from multiple sides pushed events toward war. Israeli leadership had warned for months that Iran's nuclear program was approaching a point where it could no longer be destroyed by conventional airstrikes. Political hawks in Washington argued that no agreement with Iran could be trusted. Diplomacy collapsed. Airstrikes began. The military damage to Iran in the opening phase was severe. Hundreds of missile launchers were destroyed. Large portions of the ballistic missile infrastructure were neutralized. Senior military leaders and intelligence officials were killed. And Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who had ruled Iran for more than 3 decades, died in the initial strike. Iran declared 40 days of national mourning. Shortly afterward, Mojtaba Khamenei, the supreme leader's son, emerged as the country's new leader. His first public statement warned that the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply flows, could be closed. That threat turned the regional war into a global economic crisis. Oil markets reacted immediately. Shipping companies suspended routes through the Persian Gulf. Energy prices surged. Governments began releasing emergency petroleum reserves in an attempt to stabilize global supply. Naval forces moved to secure the shipping lanes, while Iranian forces attempted to disrupt them with mines and small attack vessels. Despite suffering heavy military losses, Iran proved effective in another arena: the information war. Iranian officials appeared regularly on international media outlets describing civilian casualties from airstrikes and arguing that negotiations had been ongoing when the attacks began. The narrative battle spread across global audiences. Meanwhile, the strategic questions remained unresolved. Israel argued the strikes were necessary to prevent Iran from reaching a nuclear threshold. Iran denied pursuing nuclear weapons and cited religious rulings against them. International observers debated the legality and consequences of the attack. And the war continued with no clear endgame. Iran demanded recognition of its rights, financial reparations, and guarantees against future attacks. The United States rejected those terms and insisted on unconditional surrender. Neither side appeared willing to accept the other's conditions. Iran's military infrastructure had been badly damaged, but its ability to disrupt global energy markets remained powerful leverage. Back-channel communications quietly began between intelligence agencies searching for a path toward ceasefire negotiations. Yet many of the Iranian officials who might have signed such an agreement were dead. The conflict had entered a dangerous phase where victory, defeat, and diplomacy were all uncertain, and the world was left watching a war whose consequences stretched far beyond the battlefield.